They staked her life on a single poker hand, like she was worthless property. Laughter echoed through the smoky saloon as men mocked the silent, fragile girl they dismissed as useless. No one defended her. No one dared. But from the darkened corner, a battle-scarred Comanche warrior named Tashunka rose quietly, his eyes burning with old memories of loss. He sat down, anted up, and played, not for glory, but to shatter her chains. When he won her freedom that dusty night in 1887, he thought he was just walking away from trouble. He never dreamed this useless girl held the secret to reviving dead land and healing a soul the world had tried to bury. What hidden power turned despair into a miracle? This true heart story ends in a moment that has left millions weeping. Stay until the final word. Before we dive in, subscribe now, smash that like, and comment where you're watching from today. Let's keep these unforgettable tales alive together. The year was 1887, and Dust Creek baked under a merciless sun that turned the air into shimmering heat. The town crouched low on the cattle trails of the American West, a place where law arrived late, usually trailing a gunshot, and human lives carried little more weight than a dry acre. Inside the Rusty Spur Saloon, the air was thick with cheap whiskey, stale tobacco, and the sour sweat of defeated men. Lanterns swung from chains, casting jagged shadows across scarred tables. A poker game was grinding toward its end, but the real stake had just been thrown in. A thin girl stood beside the table, head down, dress patched and dusty. Her dark hair hung tangled over a face that gave away nothing. No tears, no defiance. The men called her Elena when they remembered her name. Mostly, they called her useless. She cooked poorly, cleaned worse, and in their eyes added nothing but another mouth during years of drought and failed herds. Tonight, drunk and broke after another ruined drive, they had run out of cash and patience. Harlan, big, red-faced, mean when sober, and worse when drunk, shoved his last crumpled bills forward, then jerked a thumb at her. She covers the rest. Take her or fold. Laughter erupted, rough and ugly. Glasses slammed. No one protested. In Dust Creek, a woman without kin or coin was property, and property could be bet. In the shadowed corner, one man had not laughed. Tashunka. Comanche. Once a feared warrior across the plains, now a loner with no band left. Gray threaded his braids. Old scars crossed his chest beneath worn buckskin. He had come only to trade pelts for salt and coffee, intending to ride out before dark brought trouble. But the laughter clawed at buried memories. Women taken in raids, villages burned, people bartered like livestock by men who later wrote laws to sanctify it. He had trained himself to look away. Meddling in white affairs brought only iron or rope. Tonight, the old fire stirred. The dealer glanced at the girl, shrugged. You in or out? Two players folded. Caleb Rourke, a sharp cattle buyer with money and land deeds, leaned back with a thin smile and matched the bet. His eyes slid over Elena like she was already catalogued. Harlan scanned the room. Anyone else? Silence. Then boots scraped. Tashunka rose. Talk died. Hands drifted toward guns. An Indian sitting at their table was bad enough. Playing for their woman was war. Tashunka walked forward without rushing. He dropped a small stack of silver dollars, everything the pelts had earned, onto the felt. I'm in, Harlan barked. You got no right here, savage. Tashunka said nothing. He sat. The dealer looked to Caleb. Caleb nodded, smile tightening. More money suited him. Cards hit the table. Smoke coiled. Only the slap of cards and creak of leather broke the quiet. Elena stood frozen, eyes on the floor. Bets climbed. Harlan sweated, reckless. Caleb, cool, measuring. Tashunka watched faces, not just cards. Final round. Harlan shoved everything. All in. Caleb studied, then matched. Tashunka looked once more at his hand. He had joined to stop the trade, not to claim anyone. Folding would leave her to the winner. He pushed his last coins forward. Call. Harlan flipped 2 pair, grinning. Caleb laid down 3 of a kind, reaching for the pot. Tashunka turned his cards. Straight, jack high. The room went dead. Harlan turned purple. Caleb froze. Then the cursing exploded. Cheating bastard. Chairs scraped. Guns cleared leather halfway. Tashunka stood slowly. Cards were fair. Pot is mine. Caleb's voice sliced cold. You think you ride out with her? Tashunka met his stare. She belongs to no one now. She walks free. He turned to Elena. She lifted her head for the first time. Dark eyes met his. Unreadable, but something shifted. He nodded toward the doors. Outside, night air struck cool after the saloon stench. Dust swirled under tied horses. Tashunka untied his pony, mounted, and reached down. Elena took his hand without pause and swung up behind him. As they rode past the lighted windows, shouts spilled out. Caleb Rourke stood framed in the doorway, watching them vanish into darkness, his face promising payment later. Tashunka did not look back. He had pulled 1 life from the filth. He thought that ended it. He was wrong. The pony's hooves drummed steadily into the night, kicking up dust that glowed faintly under a thin moon. Elena sat behind Tashunka, arms loose around his waist, not clinging, just holding on. Neither spoke. Words felt heavy, unnecessary against the wide dark. They rode west, away from Dust Creek's lanterns, and the angry voices still echoing in Tashunka's ears. He kept the pace firm, but not rushed. No pursuit came. Men like Caleb Rourke preferred paper and law when guns failed. Hours bled away. Stars wheeled overhead. The land opened, rolling prairie broken by low mesas and dry arroyos. Wind carried the sharp scent of sage and distant coyote yips. Tashunka guided the pony by feel, following a trail only he knew. Dawn found them at the edge of a shallow basin. A dry creek bed twisted through it, with dead cottonwoods along its banks. In the center stood a weathered canvas tent and a brush corral with 2 spare horses. This was Tashunka's camp. Temporary for years, ground no one else claimed. He swung down, reached up. Elena slid off without help. She stood quietly, scanning the cracked earth, burned grass, the silence broken only by wind-rattling branches. Tashunka watered the pony at a muddy seep he had dug deeper last spring, now barely trickling. Elena walked the basin alone, kneeling to crumble soil, reading the land like tracks. Days fell into rhythm. Tashunka hunted jackrabbit or traded with travelers. Elena rose before light. At first, he thought she sought escape. Then he saw her work. She gathered dried manure from old trails, mixed it with fire ash and rotting grass. With a broken shovel blade, she dug narrow trenches along slopes. She worked steadily, sweat cutting dust trails on her face. Tashunka watched from afar. He had tried planting corn here once. Nothing grew. The ground drank water and gave nothing. He left her to it, expecting failure. A hard afternoon rain slashed in, turning dust to mud, filling the creek bed briefly before soaking away. Elena was out guiding runoff into trenches with sticks and rocks. Summer dragged. Heat shimmered. The seep shrank. Her plants, beans, squash, stubborn corn, withered fast. Leaves curled black. Tashunka saw her kneel over dead rows at dusk, shoulders tight. But she pulled corpses, saved seed, and started again. He almost told her to quit. This land was dead, like everything else, but her refusal held his tongue. Fall chilled nights. They burned cow chips. Elena wrapped the seat in a damp cloth inside the tent, keeping it alive with body heat. Winter bit hard. Frost cracked the ground. Tashunka hauled water from farther sources. Spring returned warm but dry. Tashunka stood on a rise at dawn, looking over the basin. Another empty year, he thought. Time to move. Then he spotted it. A single green shoot pushing through clay where Elena had buried a bean. Small, defiant. Nearby, 2 more. Then squash leaves unfurl. He walked down slowly. Elena was there, on her knees, touching leaves like checking a pulse. She looked up. Steady nod. It held. Tashunka crouched. Soil around plants was darker. Trenches caught winter melt, held it. More shoots followed. Corn staggered up, thin but standing. Weeds came. She hoed them ruthlessly. Word spread along trails. A family detoured to see. Then a homesteader. They left with seeds and questions. Elena answered short, practical. Depth, spacing, and mixes. Tashunka watched green spread in patches, stubborn against the sun. The seep trickled longer after a storm. He felt the shift, slow, unwelcome. Hope is hurt when lost. Yet leaves mocked his certainty. One evening, Elena sat on a rock, watching the horizon. First voluntary words. "My people listened to dry land," she said quietly. Not forced it. Waited for it to speak. Tashunka sat nearby. Land stopped talking. She shook her head. Got quiet. You get quieter to hear. Night fell sharply with stars. Tashunka no longer felt like a ghost. But in Dust Creek, Caleb Rourke heard rumors. He checked old papers, measured water rights, and smiled thinly. The basin greened. Trouble rode closer. The first riders appeared on the ridge one blistering noon, silhouettes against a white sky. Tashunka spotted them from the basin rim. 3 men, leading pack mules, dust trailing like smoke. Word had traveled faster than he liked. They came for advice, then seed. A wiry homesteader and his boys wanted to know how the dead ground sprouted. Elena showed them the trenches, the ash mix, the careful spacing. They left grateful, pockets heavier with bean and squash seed. More followed. A Mexican family fleeing debt, a freedman couple staking claim. Each brought questions, left with hope and a handful of Elena's saved kernels. The basin's green patches thickened. Corn stood knee-high. Squash vines crawled. The seep held water longer. Tashunka kept watch. Strangers meant risk. He cleaned his rifle daily and rode perimeter at dawn. Elena worked sunrise to sunset, face burned dark, hands calloused deep. One evening, a trader passed through with coffee and news. Folks talk about the Comanche and the girl making miracles out here. Even in Dust Creek, they hear it. Tashunka's jaw tightened. Elena paused in mid-swing. Trouble did not rush. It waited, patient as drought. Late summer brought a hard wind that stripped leaves and rattled the tent. Tashunka returned from checking traps to find fresh hoofprints, shod horses, not Mustang. They circled the basin, stopped at the seep, and turned back toward town. 2 days later, Caleb Rourke arrived. He rode in alone at first light, suit dusty, but boots polished, silver conchos gleaming. 2 hired men waited on the ridge with rifles. Caleb dismounted smoothly, hat in hand like a gentleman caller. "Morning," he said, voice carrying easily across the rows. "Fine crop you got starting." Tashunka stepped from the tent shade, Winchester loose in his grip. Elena straightened behind him, hoe still in hand. Caleb smiled thinly. "No need for iron. I come civil. With paper." He pulled a folded document from inside his coat, with yellowed edges, wax seal cracked, held it out. Old indenture, signed by her guardian when she was a child. Debt for passage, food and lodging. Never paid. Makes her bound labor till settled. His eyes flicked to Elena. Lifetime, far as I read it. Elena's knuckles whitened on the hoe handle. Tashunka did not take the paper. She was bet. I won. Debt died at the table. Caleb chuckled low. Poker doesn't erase law, friend. And this land? He swept an arm. Federal survey says unclaimed, but I hold grazing rights on the water. That seep feeds off my spring. I can dam it upstream tomorrow. The words landed heavily. The basin lived on that trickle. I'll give you a week to hand her over quietly, Caleb continued. After that, I bring the marshal, and I shut the water. He mounted, touched his hat brim. Think hard. Dust swallowed him and his shadow riders. That night, Elena sat by the small fire, staring into flames. I'll go, she said finally. Better one leaves than both lose everything. Tashunka fed a stick to the coals. You go, he owns you again. And next year, he owns this ground anyway. She looked up sharply. Then what? We fight the paper with people. Travelers had seen Elena's work. Some owed her their own crops. Tashunka rode out next dawn, visiting claims, speaking plain. Told them Caleb meant to take the woman who saved their seed, and the water that fed everyone downstream. Word spread faster than before. The hearing was set in Dust Creek's makeshift courthouse, a plank room behind the saloon, heat-pressed thick, benches filled with homesteaders, ranch hands, and families Elena had helped. The judge, Harlan Graves, owed Caleb money from old cattle deals. Everyone knew it. Caleb laid the indenture on the table, smooth as dealing cards. Marshall stood behind him. Elena stood silent. When asked, she spoke once. I will return with Mr. Rourke if it spares trouble. Murmurs rippled. Tashunka felt the room tilt. Caleb smiled wider. The judge cleared his throat and lifted his gavel. And right then, friends, if this story of stubborn land and stubborn hearts moves you the way it does me, hit that subscribe button down below. These tales only keep coming because folks like you keep listening. Thank you. The gavel hung in the air, ready to fall. The gavel hovered, then began its drop. But before wood struck wood, the back doors banged open hard enough to rattle hinges. Hot sunlight knifed through the haze, framing a line of weathered figures. Homesteaders in patched denim, wives with sunboned faces, the Mexican Vaquero family, the Freedman couple, and their grown sons. They pushed in shoulder to shoulder, packing the narrow aisles until the room groaned. Judge Graves froze mid-motion, gavel suspended. Court's not open for spectators. The wiry homesteader who had come first for seed stepped up, hat crushed in calloused hands. We ain't spectators, Judge. We're witnesses. Caleb Rourke half rose, face tight. They got no legal standing here. Graves glanced at the marshal, shrugged sourly. Make it fast. The homesteader locked eyes with the bench. That woman there saved my family from starvation. Gave us seed when drought took everything. Taught us how to catch what little rain fell. You chain her to Rourke. You chain our water too. He'll dam the spring upstream, starve every claim downstream. We won't stand quiet for that. A low rumble rolled through the crowd. Agreement, not noise. The freedman's wife moved forward next, chin high. She nursed my man through fever without asking for pay. Worked our rows when we couldn't. Her freedom bought our harvest. We paid debts. One after another, they spoke. Short, blunt testimonies hammered like branding irons. A ranch hand admitted to helping build Caleb's illegal dam for whiskey wages. A trader swore to double-sell water rights. Each voice chipped away at the room's certainty. Caleb leaned close to Graves, hissing urgently. The judge banged once for order. That's enough theater. Then Tashunka spoke. His voice cut clean across the heat, low and steady as distant thunder. He stepped beside Elena, rawhide pouch in hand. I carry no fancy indenture. He spilled contents onto the scarred table. Hand-sketched maps of the upper draw, charcoal marks showing the new dam, dates, and initials. This is Rourke's diversion, Built quite last dry season. Steals water from the seep that feeds the basin. Caleb snorted. Scribbles. Any drunk could draw those. Tashunka laid down a torn ledger page next. Ink faded, but numbers clear. Rourke's own book. The same water was sold to the railroad surveyors, then claimed as private. Double deed. Fraud plain. The marshal took the pages, brow furrowing as he traced columns. Murmurs sharpened. A broad-shouldered drover near the door called out. "I hauled stone for that dam." Rourke threatened to blacklist any man who talked. "I talk now." More hands rose. Men who had feared Caleb's money found backbone in the packed room. The air thickened with reckoning. Caleb surged forward, voice cracking. "This is a lynching dressed as law." The marshal caught his elbow firmly. "No, this is testimony and evidence." Graves stared at the spreading papers, at the crowd pressing closer, at the marshal's steady grip. Sweat beaded under his collar. He cleared his throat hard. Twice. "Upon review of new submissions," he said, words dragging. "The claimed indenture lacks a verifiable chain of debt. Water rights appear contested. Case dismissed. The woman known as Elena is declared free under territorial statute." He turned to Caleb, voice thinner. "Mr. Rourke, you are remanded for investigation of fraud, falsified deeds, and unlawful water diversion." The room exhaled, sharp, collective. No wild cheers, just a hard release of held breath. Hats lifted briefly. Eyes glistened quickly and were wiped away. Caleb twisted against the marshal's hold, face purple. "You'll all pay for this." But his words fell flat against the wall of bodies. Elena stood still amid the shift. She met Tashunka's eyes, steady, unreadable, then gave the smallest nod. Acknowledgement. Relief. Something deeper. The crowd parted as the marshal marched Caleb out. Fine boots scuffed the plank floor, silver conchos dulled by dust. He did not look back. Tashunka and Elena walked into the blinding noon light. Hands reached, not to touch the Comanche, but offered in silence. Eyes held respect now, not suspicion. They mounted the waiting pony. Hooves struck sparks on hardpack as they left Dust Creek behind, dust cloud rising like a door slamming shut. The basin lay ahead, green patches defiant under brutal sky. Justice had ridden in late, carried on the tongues of plain folk who finally refused silence. And the land, for once, felt less like punishment. The ride back to the basin stretched long under a sky scrubbed clean by wind. No one spoke much. Words felt small after the courthouse roar. Elena rode side saddle on a borrowed mare now, Tashunka on his pony. Dust rose and settled behind them like old debts finally paid. They crested the final rise at dusk. The basin lay below, green stripes bolder than memory, corn tassels catching last light, squash blossoms glowing pale. The seep ran clear, no longer threatened. Small victories, hard won, but the land demanded constant proof. Winter snapped in early. Frost silvered grass stalks. They harvested quick beans rattled dry in pods. Squash hauled to a new root cellar dug into the slope. Corn shucked and braided high inside the sturdy wickiup Tashunka framed from bent willow and rawhide. Elena packed the floor with sweet-smelling rushes. Smoke curled straight in knife-cold air. Visitors thinned with the cold, but some still braved the trails, bringing coffee beans, coarse salt, and a bent plow blade traded fare. They asked pointed questions, left clutching seed wrapped tight in burlap. Talk turned practical. Trench depth for runoff, ash ratios, waiting on rain signs. No more miracle whispers, just methods that worked. Spring exploded fiercely. Thunderheads stacked against mountains, unleashing torrents that roared down arroyos and turned the creek bed wild. Elena's channels caught the fury, guiding it deep. Shoots erupted, corn thick as river cane, beans racing up poles. Tashunka notched from streamside cottonwood. He labored alongside her now, no longer shadowing from afar. Hands once made for lance and bow learned the pull of soil turned just right. Old scars bronzed under relentless sun. Summer baked, but changed. Clouds boiled most afternoons. Sharp showers slapped dust flat. The basin trapped water in clever pockets, low dams of stacked stone and woven brush. Green pushed past old edges, claiming cracked clay. One scorching midday, Tashunka spotted deliberate tracks, measured boot prints, government issue. A federal surveyor arrived with assistants, tripods clanking, chaining lines for new claims. They paused at the wickiup, accepted dippers of cool seep water. Land's filing open, the lead man said, mopping sweat. Cultivation proves title under the new rules. You've held longest, improved deepest. Papers emerged that week, forms signed in careful marks, boundaries staked with cedar posts. The basin passed into their names, ink drying against the wind. Years rolled steadily but full. Crops grew dependable. Surplus bartered for a tough milk cow, a coop of scratching hens, forged tools that bit earth clean. Elena crossed seeds relentlessly, old strains with wild survivors, breeding lines that laughed at dry spells. Tashunka gentled a small Mustang band, training leaders patiently for harness. Children arrived strong, first a son inheriting his mother's unflinching gaze and dirt-wise fingers, then a daughter fleet as prairie wind. They grew bilingual, Comanche tales crackling by firelight, Elena's murmured Spanish songs against the night chill. The boy read signs in dust before letters. The girl set rows, arrow straight before steady steps. Drought clawed back in the 5th season. Sky hammered brass, ground splitting like sun-bleached hide. Neighboring claims withered. Tashunka and Elena cracked open storage, doled out seed, and showed deeper contouring. Most families endured. One twilight after that siege, Tashunka perched on the familiar rise, watching heat lightning stitch far clouds. Elena settled beside him, belly swelling with the third. Figured this ground would bleed me dry, he admitted, voice gravel from rare confession. She pressed her palm to the warm earth. It tested hard. We just answered quieter. Below, mature corn whispered through no breeze stirred. Fireflies drifted over rows like low stars. The seep murmured constantly. Tashunka surveyed the spread, no longer a hidden refuge, but a living ground, feeding scattered cabins downstream. Trails crisscrossed, thin smoke columns rose from fresh claims. He had sat in a saloon, bet expecting burden. Instead found soil that answered back, a life anchored deeper than any lost on bloodied plains. The frontier shifted relentlessly, iron rails creeping nearer, boom towns swelling, old freedoms shrinking. Yet here, in this stubborn pocket, something rooted firm. Seed shared freely, water guarded communal, stories spoken plain. No marble marker claimed it. Just straight furrows under harsh sun, children's laughter threading stalks. A warrior's faded scars earned a new and honest sweat. And each spring, when tender green first pierced iron clay, Tashunka stood silent on the rise, recalling a smoky saloon, a wordless girl, a hand of cards that upended everything. The land breathed. So did they. And tomorrow's seed waited, already swelling in dark soil. From a single defiant poker hand in a dusty saloon, a scarred Comanche warrior and a silent girl, labeled worthless, turned dead land into life. Face down, greed with nothing but truth and stubborn hearts, and built something the frontier couldn't steal. What does this story stir in you? Was Elena's quiet persistence the real strength, or Tashunka's choice to stand when he could have walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. Thank you for riding this trail with me tonight. Your time means everything. If this tale touched you, hit subscribe and share where you're listening from. More stories of grit and heart are waiting. See you on the next one, partners.